I was standing by the punch bowl, feeling a surge of pride mixed with exhaustion, because we had just celebrated 20 years of marriage. 20 years. A lifetime of memories, countless challenges, and what I assumed were shared victories. Our friends were gathered in a semicircle, glasses raised, smiles on their faces. The decorations were lavish, the music was lively, and everyone seemed in a festive mood. That was until my father-in-law, Greg, cleared his throat and made a speech that left me feeling like I had just been punched in the gut. He lifted his glass and announced that he wanted to toast the true father of these wonderful children, while gesturing in the direction of my wife's longtime friend, Michael. My wife, Rebecca, smirked in a way I had never noticed before. The entire room went silent. My best friend, John, who had known me since grade school, shot me a look that screamed both confusion and pity. We were all frozen. Every syllable Greg uttered echoed in my head. He said something about how Michael had been a guiding light for Rebecca, and how her children were blessed to have such an admirable role model. His words were so twisted that for a split second I thought I was hearing things. But I wasn't. I felt heat rush into my cheeks. My hands tensed around the plastic cup of punch, nearly cracking it. At that moment, I wanted to knock over the entire dessert table or scream at Greg to shut up. Yet somehow I managed to keep still. It felt like I was outside my own body, watching the scene unfold in slow motion. My own father had flown in from Texas for this anniversary, and he looked as though he wanted to march across the room and punch Greg. Mom was clinging to Dad's sleeve, her eyes brimming with disbelief. Our guests were locked in an awkward silence, uncertain whether to laugh it off as some twisted joke or to wait for me to respond. Rebecca stood beside Greg, appearing disturbingly composed. She placed a hand gently on her father's shoulder as if to say, "Thank you for saying what needed to be said." My heart was thumping so hard that my vision blurred. This was our 20th wedding anniversary. I had sacrificed time, money, and yes, a piece of my soul, to give her this celebration that she insisted had to be big enough to impress everyone. And now her father was basically announcing that her kids belonged to another man. These kids I had raised as my own, coached in Little League, and read bedtime stories to when they were small. Every memory of them I held dear suddenly felt tainted by betrayal. I glanced around and saw a couple of my employees from the construction company I own. Their eyes kept darting to me, searching for any sign of how to react. My friend John, who had tried for months to hint that something was off about Rebecca's behavior, looked absolutely furious. In that paralyzed moment, I saw pity, shock, and a tinge of curiosity on everyone's faces. The tension was so thick that the DJ stopped the music mid-song, unsure if a fight would break out. Rebecca finally turned her head to me. She mouthed something that looked like, "Calm down, calm down." She was telling me to calm down. That statement alone lit a fire inside my chest. I thought about every time she'd called me paranoid, every moment she'd made me feel like I was being unreasonable for questioning her friendly outings with Michael. I recalled how she'd always insisted that her parents were just quirky and didn't truly mean any harm with their strange comments. Now it was glaringly obvious that she had been lying through her teeth. Then, in the strangest twist, I felt my anger begin to shift. A sense of cold calculation crept in, overriding my rage. I forced a smile, which shocked nearly everyone who saw it. The only person who didn't seem confused was Rebecca. Her expression turned sour, as though she realized I might have known something she didn't expect me to know. Maybe she was starting to sense that she had crossed a line from which there would be no return. The truth was, I had taken the children for secret DNA tests just days before this grand celebration. I had grown tired of the rumors, tired of the pointed remarks from her family, and tired of feeling like a fool in my own home. The results that arrived just hours before the party confirmed what part of me had always feared. Not one of my so-called children was mine biologically. Not a single one. 20 years of marriage, and everything was a lie. As I stood there listening to Greg's vile toast, a strange kind of relief washed over me. My heart was still shattered, of course, but at least now I had clarity. All those nights I had spent tossing and turning, wondering if I was just being too jealous, had led to this final, horrible confirmation. Watching Rebecca's face, I could see that she relished my discomfort. She didn't even look ashamed. I might have been the breadwinner, the father figure, the steady provider, but apparently, in her eyes, I was nothing but a placeholder. The moment ended only when a couple of servers started discreetly picking up plates and clearing the leftover appetizers, trying to restore some sense of normalcy. The guests, unsure what to do, awkwardly sipped from their cups or left for the bar. Greg gave me the nastiest smirk before taking a swig from his champagne flute. He looked me straight in the eye as if daring me to cause a scene in front of all these people. Perhaps he believed that I was too timid to retaliate, that I would just stand there and swallow this humiliation to keep the peace. Rebecca leaned over and whispered something to him. They both glanced at Michael, who stood near the cake, trying to look like an innocent bystander. My stomach churned. But I was done being the silent, trusting husband. I locked eyes with Rebecca, holding that stare longer than I ever had before. She raised an eyebrow, almost amused. In that moment, I silently vowed to myself that I would show her just how wrong she was to assume I would always be the clueless man in the background. My mind spun with the possibilities. The finances, the house, the business I helped her build from the ground up. All of it was in play now. I felt adrenaline course through my veins. Despite the catastrophic blow I had just taken, I found an unexpected surge of confidence. I was not going to be the fool in the room. If she wanted to humiliate me, then fine, but that meant I was free to do what needed to be done. And I already had a head start with those DNA tests tucked away in a safety deposit box, ready to be deployed when the time was right. Let them all keep talking, I thought. Let them enjoy this moment they had plotted for who knows how long. Because soon, I would unleash a truth even more devastating than their smug little toast. I slowly raised my own glass, toasted Greg and Michael with the iciest smile I could manage, and swallowed a gulp of punch. It tasted like acid going down my throat, but it was nothing compared to the bitterness of betrayal. My friends hovered nearby, apparently at a loss for words. Still, I said nothing, keeping my composure. Behind my eyes, a storm of fury and sadness raged. But on my face, I portrayed a calm acceptance. Let everyone think I was numb. By the end of all this, they would see that I had been preparing for this moment, quietly gathering every piece of evidence I needed. I set my cup down on the nearest table, took a breath, and shot one more glance at Rebecca. Deep down, she knew something was off. The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes was enough for me to know I had the upper hand. No one else in that room had the slightest clue what I planned to do next. They were still reeling from the shock of Greg's toast. My father stood in a corner, his knuckles white around the glass he was clutching, about to give me an earful. Yet I maintained my quiet stance, because this was my moment of revelation. Finally, I had undisputed proof that the woman I had slept next to for 2 decades was nothing but a lying, scheming partner from day one. And I intended to make her regret every despicable trick she ever pulled on me. People kept glancing in my direction, expecting a massive reaction that never arrived. That moment right after Greg's toast lingered like a bad stench, and I could feel the energy in the room shifting. My dad practically dragged me aside to a quiet corner near the kitchen. His voice was low but urgent, telling me we needed to pack it in and leave. He couldn't understand why I was just standing there without yelling or at least defending myself. All I could manage was a small shrug and a look in my eyes that probably made me seem half-crazed. Dad didn't know I already had the evidence I needed, hidden away like a trump card waiting to be played. While he argued with me in hushed tones, my mind drifted to the memories of all those times Rebecca had gaslit me. Every instance she'd slipped away for business events related to her beauty salon, every suspicious text she'd brushed off by blaming my insecurity. She had always wanted me to play the part of a docile, clueless husband, and for years I did. I used to think it was just me overreacting to small signs. But now the entire facade was cracking wide open. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Rebecca sashaying across the room, accepting consoling pats on the shoulder from some of her friends, as though she were the victim in all this. She fanned her face dramatically, like the emotional stress was just too much for her to handle. Yet, it didn't stop her from shooting me these smug half-smiles, like she knew she had the power. If anyone had seen her eyes at that moment, they would have recognized the enjoyment lurking beneath her distress. Only I knew the truth. The version of her that most people saw was a performance, crafted to perfection so she could get away with anything. She walked over to me, placed her hand on my arm, and whispered in my ear, "Let's not ruin our anniversary by blowing this out of proportion, James." She had the nerve to act like we were just dealing with a minor misunderstanding. I'm telling you." Her voice was so calm and patronizing that I almost laughed out loud. I yanked my arm away from her, and she looked around to see who was watching, quickly readjusting her facial expression to appear hurt by my reaction. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Meanwhile, Greg was chatting loudly with a few people who seemed unsure whether to nod sympathetically or recoil in disgust. He kept clinking his glass to get attention, like he was the ringmaster at a circus. My in-laws had never liked me. That much was clear. But I never expected such an unhinged move, even from them. It felt like I was caught in some twisted reality show where I was the last to find out the script. Michael stayed closer to the doorway, feigning innocence behind a forced smile. Every now and then, he'd glance at Rebecca, as if looking for reassurance that this was all going according to plan. It struck me that maybe they had orchestrated this big reveal together, hoping to finally push me aside so they could flaunt their relationship openly. Suddenly, a voice came through the overhead speaker. Our friend Sarah tried to lighten the mood by inviting everyone to start dancing again, saying, "All right, folks, it's time to get back to celebrating 20 years of love." Her forced enthusiasm was painful to listen to. I almost felt sorry for her. The music kicked back in, but it only made the scene more surreal. A few couples started to shuffle awkwardly on the dance floor, pretending the drama was just a glitch in the evening. Rebecca noticed me looking at Michael and stepped into my line of sight like a shield, as if to block the tension. Her voice dropped an octave. She was doing that overly sweet tone that used to work on me when she wanted something. She said, "James, don't make a scene. We'll talk about this later when things have calmed down. But trust me, you're overthinking all of this." Overthinking. That's what she'd always say to shut me up. As if 20 years of marriage and this grotesque betrayal could be minimized to overthinking. I leveled my gaze at her and responded with a single word, "Sure." She blinked, probably caught off guard by my lack of protest. Then her lips parted in the slightest grin, and she reached over to delicately pat my chest. The sheer arrogance of that gesture made my stomach churn. She seemed confident that she could wiggle out of this with some excuses, maybe blame it on a joke taken too far. The rest of the night was a blur of forced smiles and polite small talk, at least for those who still remained. Many of my friends quietly slipped out, offering apologetic glances in my direction. John and his wife stuck around, though watching my every move like they were ready to step in if I finally lost it. I stayed calm, sipping water and occasionally nodding at whoever approached me with an uncomfortable smile. The truth is, my mind was racing with the next steps. How to protect my assets, how to secure my company, and how to ensure that when all this blew up, Rebecca and Michael would be left holding the pieces of their self-inflicted mess. At one point, Michael inched his way over to me, carrying his champagne flute with a shaky hand. "Hey man," he started, wearing the fakest grin I'd ever seen. "I think there might be some confusion here. Greg was he was making a joke. A really bad one." He tried to give me one of those man-to-man pats on the back. I could smell the nervousness on him like cheap cologne. My reflex was to shove him away, but I contained myself. Instead, I locked eyes with him and said, "Whatever you say, buddy." He attempted to chuckle, but the sound died in his throat, and he quickly made his exit. That's how the rest of the evening went. Rebecca strolled around, milking sympathy from people who didn't really know the full story. Her father gloated in the background. My parents fumed quietly, and Michael tried his best to avoid being cornered by me or anyone else who might grill him. By the time we were ready to leave, the celebration had thinned out to just a few die-hard partygoers who wanted to keep the drinks flowing no matter what. I spotted Rebecca hugging one of her salon friends, whispering something into her ear. The friend then looked over at me and smirked. So maybe they all knew. Maybe they'd known for years. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, but I still managed to stand tall and keep my expression neutral. My dad gave me a ride home. No one trusted me behind the wheel after the emotional hailstorm of the evening. During the drive, he gripped the steering wheel tightly and said, "I raised you to stand up for yourself, James. If you need me to, I'll talk to a lawyer friend of mine first thing tomorrow." I told him that I already had a plan, and his eyebrows shot up in surprise. I could sense the pride in his voice mixed with worry. He didn't know exactly what I was up to, but he trusted me enough not to pry. Walking into our house was like stepping onto a battlefield after the fighting was done. Everything was quiet, but you could almost smell the tension lingering. I flipped on the lights, and my gaze landed on the framed photos lining the hallway. Pictures of my kids. No, of Rebecca's kids and me. At birthdays and holidays, each one now feeling like a fraud. That realization cut deep. I wanted to rip the pictures off the walls and smash them, but I forced myself to keep walking, refusing to let rage dictate my actions. Rage was fleeting. Strategy was everything. Rebecca tried to follow me into the bedroom, but I closed the door in her face and locked it. She didn't even pound on the door or demand an explanation. Instead, she simply huffed and told me she'd be sleeping in the guest room if I couldn't be mature about things, as if I was the one overreacting. The sheer nerve of that statement was almost comical. Through the door, I could hear her phone ringing and her muffled voice, probably telling someone how I was making a big deal out of nothing. Alone in that room, I finally let out the shaking breath I had been holding for hours. The DNA test results, the toast, the humiliating knowledge that they all might be in on this. I let it all sink in. I ran my hand over my face, feeling the hot sting of tears that refused to fall. In the span of one night, 2 decades of my life had been laid bare as a complete farce. Yet, I had to keep reminding myself that I was no longer in the dark. I had the final puzzle piece, those DNA results, and a plan brewing in my mind. I grabbed my phone and typed a note to myself with a list. Call my lawyer, secure bank accounts, move certain assets. The reality of it was messy, but I felt a surge of grim determination. I was tired of being painted as the naive husband. For too long, I had worked tirelessly to make her business a success. I had poured in capital, made sure the salon had the perfect location, hired marketing professionals to elevate her brand. She had let me do it all, I now realized, because it was convenient for her. Lying back on the bed, I stared at the ceiling, processing it all. My grief was turning into anger, and my anger was evolving into something far more controlled. I was devising a strategy to uproot her entire sense of security. Tomorrow I'd start making calls. I'd start setting into motion a chain of events that would show her what real betrayal felt like. As night blurred into morning, I listened to the heavy silence of the house, imagining the look on Rebecca's face when she realized her life was about to crumble at her feet. And by the time the first rays of sunlight pushed through the blinds, I had convinced myself that no matter how much this hurt, it was time for payback, and I was fully ready to deliver. The morning after the party, I woke up before the sun had fully risen. I hadn't really slept, just laid there in the darkness, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. My mind had run through every possible scenario, every argument, every stupid little moment I had overlooked throughout the years. Now I was done reflecting. It was time to act. I slid out of bed, showered, and dressed in silence. The house was eerily still, like it knew something had shifted. Rebecca was still asleep in the guest room, oblivious to the fact that her world was about to shatter. I walked downstairs, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. First on my list, my lawyer. I had worked with Mark for years. He handled contracts for my construction business, a man who valued precision and discretion. He picked up on the third ring. "James? It's early," he said, his voice still groggy. "What's up?" I didn't waste time. "Mark, I need to file for divorce. Today. And I need to make sure Rebecca doesn't get a single damn cent more than what the law requires." There was a pause. I could hear sheets rustling on his end, like he was sitting up in bed. "All right," he said carefully. "I assume this isn't coming out of nowhere?" I exhaled, gripping my coffee cup tightly. "Not even close. She's been cheating on me for years, Mark. And listen to this, I had the kids tested. None of them are mine." Silence. "Jesus," he muttered. "Okay, that changes things. First, we lock down assets. You said you want to make sure she doesn't get more than she's owed. How much is in joint accounts?" "Nothing anymore," I said flatly. "I moved it all last night." I could hear the smirk in his voice. "Smart man. What about the business?" That was the part one was looking forward to. "She thinks it's hers, but legally? I own the majority stake. I funded it. It was my money that got it off the ground, my connections that helped her make it successful. She's just the face of it." I paused, feeling something cold settle in my chest. "By the end of today, she won't have that either." Mark whistled low. "Damn. All right, I'll get the papers drawn up. Do you want to hit her with a lawsuit for fraud? That made me pause. I hadn't even considered that, but the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Let's explore it, I said, especially if it helps make sure she walks away with nothing but regrets. We went over a few more details before hanging up. By the time I ended the call, the sun was creeping through the windows, painting the kitchen in soft light. It was ironic. Everything looked so peaceful, like it wasn't the scene of a war about to begin. I heard movement upstairs, then footsteps. Showtime. Rebecca walked into the kitchen, wrapped in one of her silk robes. She always had a way of looking effortlessly put together, even when she had just woken up. She stretched her arms, yawning like she hadn't a single care in the world. Then she saw me. Something flickered across her face. It wasn't fear, not yet, just mild curiosity. "You're up early," she said, moving toward the coffee pot. "So are you," I replied, watching her carefully. She smirked, pouring herself a cup. "Couldn't sleep. Too much excitement last night." I took a sip of my coffee, letting the silence drag. She leaned against the counter, stirring her cup, probably expecting me to bring up the party. Instead, I said, "I transferred ownership of the salon this morning." The spoon clinked against the ceramic. Her hand froze mid-stir. Then, very slowly, she set the cup down and turned to face me fully. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her jaw. "Excuse me?" I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms out lazily, as if this was just another morning. I said, "I transferred ownership. It's not yours anymore. Legally, it was never yours to begin with." The silence was deafening. Then she laughed, short, breathless, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "James," she said, shaking her head, "I don't know what kind of mood you're in this morning, but let's not play games." I stared at her. "No games, Rebecca. Just facts." I could see it now, the first ripple of panic behind her eyes. She picked up her cup and took a sip, probably to buy herself time to think. Then, with that same sickly sweet voice she used whenever she was about to manipulate me, she said, "Why don't we sit down and talk about whatever's going on?" I almost laughed in her face. Now she wanted to talk? Now she wanted to work through things? I stood up, pushing my chair back. "No need. You'll get the paperwork later today. We're done, Rebecca. Divorce is already in motion. You're going to need a new source of income, because as of right now, you're not touching another dollar of mine." She flinched. It was subtle, but I caught it. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I saw something real in her expression. Fear. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "James," she tried again, softer this time. "Don't be rash. I know last night got out of hand, but you're upset. I understand." She reached for me, placing a hand on my arm. "Let's take a breath." I yanked my arm away like her touch burned. That's when the mask started to slip. Her expression hardened. The fake sympathy drained from her eyes, replaced with something colder, sharper. "So that's it? You're just going to throw away 20 years? I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "You threw it away the second you climbed into bed with another man." She sucked in a breath. I saw her hands clench into fists at her sides. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control. I didn't give her a chance to respond. I grabbed my car keys, walked past her, and headed for the front door. As I reached for the handle, I glanced back over my shoulder. "Oh," I added, my tone casual. "You might want to give Michael a call. I filed for child support under his name this morning." Then I walked out, leaving her standing there, barefoot in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee that was growing colder by the second. I didn't look back. I walked straight to my truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway with a calm I hadn't felt in years. The morning air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up fast. I gripped the wheel tighter, letting the silence of the empty street settle over me. I had done it. The first strike had landed, and judging by Rebecca's face, she hadn't seen it coming. But this was far from over. I had business to take care of, and my first stop was the bank. While I had already transferred most of my money into a private account, there were still some loose ends I needed to tie up. The moment I walked into my branch, the manager, a guy named Todd, greeted me with a firm handshake. He was an old acquaintance, someone who had helped me set up financial protections for my business years ago. Today, he was about to help me make sure Rebecca didn't get a dime more than what the courts would force me to hand over. "James," Todd said, motioning for me to follow him to his office. "Got your message last night. Sounds like you're making some major moves." I sat down across from him, resting my forearms on the desk. "Yeah, and I need them airtight. Divorce papers are getting filed today, and I want to make sure Rebecca has zero access to anything beyond the accounts that were already in her name." Todd nodded. "We can lock her out of any joint credit cards immediately. Any auto payments linked to your accounts. Cancel them," I said. "She can figure out how to pay for her own luxuries from now on." Todd smirked but kept it professional. "Consider it done." "What about the house?" I leaned back, tapping my fingers against the armrest. "I bought it before we got married. She's got no legal claim to it, but I'm sure she'll try to fight for it. Mark, my lawyer, is handling that. In the meantime, I want to make sure she can't take out any loans against it or try to sell anything behind my back." Todd nodded, pulling up documents on his screen. "We'll get a hold placed on any financial transactions regarding the property. No loans, no refinancing, nothing without your explicit consent." I exhaled. Good. That was another layer of protection in place. Before I left, Todd glanced up at me. "For what it's worth, James, I've seen a lot of divorces get ugly, but it sounds like you're playing this smart." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah, took me 20 years to realize I needed to." As I left the bank, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Rebecca's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring. She called again and again. By the fourth attempt, I finally answered. "What?" I said, not bothering with pleasantries. "James, you need to come home. Right now." Her voice wasn't sweet anymore. It was sharp, angry, panicked. "Good." I smirked, climbing into my truck. "Something wrong, sweetheart?" "You're playing a dangerous game," she hissed. "You think you can just cut me off? You think you can just take everything from me?" I turned the key in the ignition, letting the engine rumble before answering. "I'm not taking anything. I'm just making sure you don't get to keep what was never yours to begin with." Silence. Then a low, bitter laugh. "You're pathetic, James. You're throwing a tantrum because you can't handle the truth." "Which part?" I asked, feigning curiosity. "The part where you lied to me for 2 decades? Or the part where your real baby daddy is about to start making child support payments?" That one landed. I could hear the sharp inhale on the other end of the line. "Michael isn't." She stopped herself, but it was too late. The hesitation was enough. I smiled. "Oh, he is, Rebecca. The tests don't lie. But go ahead, call him. I'd love to hear how that conversation goes." She snapped. "You son of a bitch." I laughed. I actually laughed. "See you in court, darling." And then I hung up. I felt alive. For years, Rebecca had controlled the narrative. She had made me doubt myself, made me feel like I was the crazy one. But now the tables had turned. And she knew it. As I pulled onto the freeway, my next call was to Mark. "Move forward with everything," I told him. "Full speed ahead." Mark chuckled. "Already on it." I hung up, rolling down the window and letting the wind whip through the cab. For the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't just reacting to Rebecca's lies. I was the one in control, and I was just getting started. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of my construction office, my phone had racked up over a dozen missed calls from Rebecca. Each one felt like a victory. I ignored them all. Inside, my assistant, Linda, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had been with me since I started this company, looked up from her desk and immediately narrowed her eyes. "You look like a man on a mission." I smirked. "Something like that." She pointed at my office. "John's already in there waiting for you. Said it was urgent." That caught my attention. John wasn't just my best friend, he was also my business partner. If he was waiting for me before business hours, it wasn't for small talk. I stepped into my office and found him pacing near the window, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. He looked up the second I shut the door. "Jesus, James, what the hell happened last night?" he asked. "I mean, I know Greg went nuclear, but after you left, Rebecca was..." He let out a low whistle. "Let's just say she didn't take it well." I dropped into my chair, rubbing a hand down my face. "What did she do?" She was running her mouth, playing the victim, acting like you were the one who betrayed her. He shook his head. And Michael? That spineless little weasel ghosted. Left the party entirely. Just disappeared. That made me chuckle. Yeah, well, he's got bigger problems now. Like court-ordered child support. John nearly spit out his coffee. You did what? I leaned back, lacing my fingers behind my head. Filed it this morning. Michael's officially responsible for his kids. John let out a low, impressed laugh. Damn, man. I knew you were gonna hit back. But this is next level. I shrugged. She wanted to humiliate me. Instead, I'm burning down the house she built. John sat down across from me, shaking his head. So what's next? You know she's not gonna go down without a fight. She's already calling me non-stop, I said. She's desperate. But I'm not giving her a damn thing beyond what the law forces me to. John took a sip of his coffee, considering something. You sure she's not gonna try anything reckless? You just pulled the rug out from under her. That was the one thing I still wasn't certain about. Rebecca was ruthless, but she was also arrogant. She had spent years believing she was untouchable. Now that she was losing control, I had no doubt she'd lash out. The only question was how. As if on cue, Linda knocked and stuck her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a Rebecca Hastings here demanding to see you. John and I exchanged a look. That was fast. Linda arched a brow. Want me to tell her to take a hike? I smirked. No. Let her in. Linda gave a small nod and disappeared. A few seconds later, the office door swung open, and there she was. Rebecca. She wasn't wearing the smug expression from last night. Her hair was pulled into a tight ponytail. Her makeup was heavier than usual, probably to hide the fact that she hadn't slept, and she was gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. She shut the door behind her without saying a word and turned to face me. Leave us, she ordered John. He let out a slow chuckle. Not happening, sweetheart. Her eyes flicked to him, full of venom, but she didn't argue. Instead, she took a few steps forward and planted her hands on my desk, leaning in. You think you're clever? She hissed. You think you can just erase me? I stared at her, unbothered. I think you should sit down. I think you should go to hell. John let out a low whistle. This is gonna be fun. Rebecca turned her glare back to me. Undo it. Undo what? I asked lazily, tilting my head. Be specific. She slammed her hands on the desk. Don't play games, James. The business. The money. The goddamn child support. You're ruining my life. I arched a brow. You mean Michael's life? Those are his kids. Remember? Her face contorted, but she quickly smoothed it over. James, she started, her voice softer now, dripping with fake sympathy. We don't have to do this. We don't have to destroy each other. I smirked. Oh, I want to destroy you, Rebecca. That's the difference. Her nostrils flared. You owe me. That actually made me laugh. Owe you? Rebecca, I built you. Your business, my money, the house you live in, mine. And those kids you let me believe were mine? That lie alone should land you in court for fraud. Her face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. You're just bitter. You can't stand that I had a life outside of you. You had a whole family outside of me, I corrected. And you were dumb enough to think I'd never figure it out. She let out a sharp breath, straightening. You're making a mistake, James. If you do this, you'll regret it. I stood up, slowly rounding the desk until I was standing right in front of her. No, Rebecca, you made the mistake, and now you get to regret it. For the first time, real fear flickered across her face. Good. She had spent 20 years lying to me. Now it was her turn to lose everything. Rebecca's breathing had turned shallow, her eyes darting between me and John, looking for some kind of opening. She must have realized that she had lost control of the conversation, no, of everything, because the fake bravado was starting to crack. Her voice dropped, laced with that manipulative sweetness she had perfected over the years. James, she said softly, tilting her head like she was trying to reach me on some emotional level. We don't have to go to war. This doesn't have to get ugly. I let out a slow, humorless chuckle. You're standing in the rubble of what you destroyed, and you're asking me not to make it ugly? Her lips pressed together. I was unhappy, James. Oh, unhappy? I repeated, nodding mockingly. That's your excuse? That justifies lying to me for 20 years? Letting me raise his kids? Spending my money while screwing another man? Her jaw tightened, and her mask cracked just a little more. I was in a difficult position. No, I cut her off sharply. You were in a comfortable position. You had everything. A husband who worked himself into the ground to provide for you. A business handed to you on a silver platter. A house that I bought. And you still chose to betray me. She flinched at the word chose, and for a second, just a second, I saw a flicker of something that almost looked like regret. But then it was gone, replaced by that cold calculation I now recognize so well. She exhaled sharply and stepped back, straightening her shoulders. You need to reconsider this. I have rights, James. I crossed my arms, tilting my head. Let me guess. Now you want to negotiate? She smirked, regaining some of her arrogance. We were married for 20 years. You can't just wipe me out like I never existed. Courts don't work that way. John snorted from the side. Lady, you don't even realize how screwed you are. She shot him a glare before looking back at me. I'm willing to compromise. We can avoid a messy court battle. Let me keep the salon, and I won't come after the house. I let out a slow, exaggerated exhale, pretending to think about it. Let me see. No. Her nostrils flared. James, you never owned the salon, Rebecca, I reminded her. You didn't pay for it, you didn't manage it. I let you play CEO while I ran everything behind the scenes. The second I pulled the plug, it was gone. Just like you will be. Her composure cracked completely now. You can't do this to me. I took a step closer, dropping my voice to a low, icy tone. I already did. For the first time since this all started, Rebecca actually looked defeated. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. And then, just as quickly, she shifted gears again. You're a spiteful bastard, she spat, her face twisting in rage. You liked playing the doting husband, didn't you? You needed me. And now that I don't want you anymore, you're throwing a tantrum like a pathetic little. Before she could finish, John let out a loud clap that made her jump. All right, and there it is. The mask fully off, ladies and gentlemen. James, I think that about wraps up this meeting, don't you? I smirked at him before turning back to Rebecca. You can go now. She glared at me, her hands shaking at her sides. This isn't over. I leaned in just slightly. Oh, sweetheart, I whispered, my voice full of mock sympathy. It is for you. Rebecca's jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. Then, without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard that one of the picture frames on the wall rattled. The second she was gone, John let out a low whistle and sat back down. That was satisfying. I exhaled, rubbing my jaw. She's not done. She's gonna come back with something. John nodded. Yeah, probably. But let's be real. She's cornered, and she knows it. Everything she thought she had? It's gone. I leaned against my desk, thinking, she might try to drag this out in court. John smirked. Doesn't matter. She's got no real leverage. And even if she does want to fight, you've already won. The money's gone. The business is gone. Her reputation is about to take a major hit. I let out a breath, nodding. He was right. But I also knew Rebecca well enough to know she wasn't the type to just accept defeat. No, she was going to lash out. The only question was how. And I was going to be ready for it. Rebecca was gone. But the war wasn't over. I knew her too well. She wasn't the type to take a loss quietly. She'd be plotting her next move, and I had to stay ahead. John leaned back, still smirking. So, what's next? I checked my phone. Another missed call from her. Then, a text. You have no idea what you've started. I laughed. She was the one who set this fire. I was just making sure she burned in it. I'm locking down everything, I said. The house, assets, legal protections. She's desperate now, and desperate people do stupid things. John nodded. Smart. You think she'll try to come after the business legally? She can't, I said. She never had a real stake in it. But she'll try to make my life hell in other ways. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. A call from an unknown number. I sighed and answered. Yeah. A deep male voice responded. Mr. Hastings, this is Detective Warren. We need you to come down to the station. Your wife has filed a complaint against you. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. And there it was. Her next move. I stood up, grabbing my keys. Looks like Rebecca just made her biggest mistake yet. I drove straight to the police station, my mind already calculating. Rebecca thought she could scare me with the law? She had no idea who she was up against now. Inside, Detective Warren, a stocky man in his 50s, greeted me with a neutral expression. Mr. Hastings, have a seat. I did. What exactly am I being accused of? He exhaled, flipping open a file. Your wife claims you made threats of financial ruin and harm against her. I let out a sharp laugh. I took back what was mine. That's not a crime. Warren studied me. She also says you've been emotionally abusive throughout the marriage. I leaned forward. Did she also mention the 20-year affair? Or how I just proved her kids aren't mine? Because that's emotional abuse. His brow lifted slightly. She left that part out. Of course she did. He shut the file. Honestly, this looks like a desperate move. Just tell your lawyer and stay out of trouble. I smirked. Oh, I'm not the one in trouble. As I left, I checked my phone. A new message from Rebecca. That was just the beginning. I shook my head, smiling. She still didn't get it. I wasn't playing her game anymore. She was playing mine. I walked out of that station with a grin on my face. Rebecca's play had been predictable. She wanted to scare me, make me hesitate, maybe even force me into a deal. But all she did was show her hand too early. She was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. Sitting in my truck, I dialed Mark. He answered on the first ring. Got a fun update for you, I said. Rebecca filed a bullshit complaint. Emotional abuse, financial threats, you name it. Mark sighed. Figures. She's trying to set up a sympathy case for court. Any charges? No. Detective practically rolled his eyes at it. Still, Mark said. This means we go full defense now. I'll push to expedite the divorce and get a restraining order against her before she tries something worse. I smirked. Do it. I hung up and checked my messages. John had sent me one. Michael's losing his mind. That got my attention. I called him back immediately. You're gonna love this, John said. Words out about the child support. Michael's freaking out. Apparently, he had no clue you filed for it. I laughed. Oh, so Rebecca didn't warn him? What a shame. She probably thought she could fix it before he found out. I leaned back in my seat, feeling a sense of satisfaction settle in. Michael had been cocky, thinking he could play house with my wife while I unknowingly funded their lives. Now, he was staring down the barrel of 18 years of payments. Where is he now? I asked. No clue, but he's been calling Rebecca nonstop. Good, I muttered. Let them turn on each other. I sat there for a moment watching the city move around me. Rebecca had spent years controlling the narrative, twisting things in her favor. But now she was scrambling, and I was just getting started. I drove back home, calm, collected. Rebecca had fired her shot, but it had backfired spectacularly. The complaint was useless, and now Michael was panicking. That meant only one thing. Rebecca's empire of lies was caving in on itself. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something. A sleek black BMW parked at the curb. Someone was waiting for me. Michael. I smiled. Perfect. He stepped out the second I killed the engine. He looked rough, like he hadn't slept, his shirt wrinkled, hair a mess. He tried to play it cool, but the second he opened his mouth, his voice betrayed him. You really think this is funny? He snapped. I leaned against my truck. Yeah, actually, it's hilarious. He took a step forward, jabbing a finger at me. You had no right to. I cut him off with a laugh. No right? Michael, you screwed my wife for 2 decades and let me raise your kids. But sure, let's talk about rights. His jaw clenched. You blindsided me. Blindsided you? I scoffed. You blindsided me. I found out yesterday that the kids I raised aren't mine. You've known for years. Hell, Rebecca's whole damn family knew. But you didn't think I'd ever catch on, did you? Michael swallowed hard, eyes darting toward the house. Look, I don't want this to get ugly. I smirked. Oh, buddy, we're past that. You owe child support. Rebecca's losing everything. and I'm going to make sure neither of you crawl out of this clean. His fists clenched. For a second, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. I almost hoped he would. It'd feel damn good to knock him flat on his ass. Instead, he stepped back, exhaling sharply. This isn't over. I grinned. Oh, I hope not. He got into his car, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame, then sped off. I stood there for a moment, taking in the quiet. This was better than I had ever imagined. Rebecca had lost her business. Michael was drowning in financial ruin. And I was winning. I walked up to my front door, savoring the moment. The house felt different now, less like a home, more like a trophy I had reclaimed. Every step inside was a reminder that I had won. Rebecca was in the living room pacing. She spun around the second I shut the door. Her eyes were wild, her face flushed. You talked to Michael. It wasn't a question. I smirked. Yeah. He's not handling things too well. She scoffed. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I leaned against the doorframe. More than you could ever imagine. She stepped closer, eyes flashing with fury. You think you've destroyed me? You think I'll just roll over? I shrugged. Doesn't matter what you do now, Rebecca. It's already done. The salon? Gone. Your money? Locked up. Michael? He's your problem now. And those kids? I shook my head, my voice turning ice cold. They're not mine. Something in her broke then. I saw it in the way her body stiffened, in the brief flicker of real panic in her eyes. You're just going to abandon them? She whispered. I tilted my head. Abandon them? No, Rebecca. You did that the second you decided to lie for 20 years. She clenched her jaw, breathing hard. You're not a victim, James. I let out a slow chuckle. Oh, but I was. Not anymore. She was unraveling, and she knew it. She had nothing left. No money, no safety net, no control. For the first time in her life, she was powerless. I turned toward the stairs, done with the conversation. Where are you going? She snapped. I didn't even look back. To pack. Because tomorrow I was leaving this house, leaving her behind. And unlike Rebecca, when I walked away, I'd never look back.
It started with the sock drawer. No, really. That stupid drawer. Vanessa always had this neurotic habit of folding socks in threes, not pairs. 3. Don't ask me why. I stopped trying to understand it years ago. But that morning, I opened it while grabbing something for our kid, and bam, pairs. Neat, boring little pairs. I stood there staring at them like they'd just whispered something to me. Like they were mocking me. It wasn't just socks. It was the smell of her perfume that used to linger on her pillow but vanished lately, replaced by some faint, unfamiliar citrus note. It was the sudden disappearance of that green mug she used every morning, the one with the chip on the handle that she insisted added character. Now she used a plain white one. Quiet, clean, sterile. Something was being wiped away, erased. Then came the Tuesdays. Vanessa used to hate Tuesdays, always moaning about how the week still had too far to go and how awful the cafeteria coffee was. But suddenly, she started dressing just a bit too sharp for a day she despised. Hair done tighter, earrings that matched, subtle makeup that looked accidental until you realized how precisely careless it was. I joked once, just to test the waters, and said, big meeting or a secret fashion show, expecting a laugh or a fake eye roll. Instead, she froze mid-bite of her toast and replied, "Can I care how I look?" I nodded, smiled, and filed that tone into a folder in my brain labeled, unnecessary defensiveness. I never said it out loud, but our house began to feel like a stage. Like she was playing a character who hadn't quite memorized her lines. Our son would ask where mommy was, and the answer became increasingly vague. Working late. Parent emergency. Student crisis. Always with that same pause before she said it, like she was flipping through options in her head. I wasn't looking for problems. I was busy, really busy. The kind of busy that made the days blur together. But even in the middle of deadlines and server patches and bug reports, I couldn't ignore the shifting gravity of the place we called home. You don't need a smoking gun when the air tastes like smoke. Then came Thursday night. She came home late again, tossed her bag on the couch, kicked off her shoes in that fast, sloppy way she does when she's flustered, and poured herself a glass of wine before I even said hi. I watched her from the kitchen. She avoided eye contact like it owed her money. I said, gently, I could swing by and meet you after work tomorrow. Grab dinner. She didn't even hesitate. Why? You think I'm lying about where I go? That wasn't an answer. It was a bullet. I didn't respond. Just nodded. Let the silence swallow it. She walked past me like I was furniture. That used to bother me. That night, it fascinated me. I stayed up after she went to bed, just sitting in the hallway, staring at our bedroom door like it held some ancient riddle I'd finally grown tired of pretending didn't exist. And that's when the idea came. Not with fireworks. Not with some movie-style montage of me piecing things together. Just a quiet, flickering thought that didn't go away. What if I wasn't crazy? What if there was something? And what if I could stop guessing and just watch? I didn't want a confrontation. I didn't want a screaming match or some cliché scene where I hold up her phone and say, gotcha. I wanted the truth cold, undistorted, unedited. I wanted to see what she looked like when she didn't know I was looking. So I opened my laptop. Search baby monitors with cloud storage and remote access. Not the cheap ones. I picked the kind that came with motion triggers and a discreet design. Justified it, of course. Told myself it was for our kid. Safety first, right? But the moment I clicked purchase, I already knew exactly where I was going to put it. And it wasn't pointed at the crib. The store smelled like plastic and artificial lemon cleaner, like someone tried to cover up something rotten and didn't quite succeed. I wasn't in the mood to browse. I knew exactly what I came for. The guy behind the counter asked if I needed help. I said I was looking for a baby monitor. He pointed toward aisle 7, but I was already halfway there. I didn't want a cutesy one with pastel bears and lullabies. I wanted function. Wi-Fi streaming, cloud storage, night vision, motion alerts. Something precise, surgical. The box didn't even say monitor on it. Just smart nursery cam. Sounded innocuous enough. I paid cash. No rewards card, no phone number, no trace. On the way out, a kid offered to help me to my car. I told him no thanks. I wasn't about to let some 16-year-old peek into my cart and see the tool I planned to use to audit my marriage. By the time I got home, Vanessa was already gone, something about a district-wide workshop that might go late. Of course, I smiled at the irony. Perfect. I went upstairs and stood in our bedroom, the one with the beige walls she insisted were soothing, and the stack of unread parenting books collecting dust under her nightstand. Our son's crib sat in the corner, silent and clean. I attached the camera just above the mobile, angled downward, but not too much. Here's the thing. If someone tells you you're paranoid, they usually expect you to back down. But in tech, paranoia is a virtue. It means you see the back doors no one else does. And I saw this room like a network diagram. Entry points, dead zones, blind spots. So I adjusted the angle, just slightly, until it caught the edge of the adult bed. Just enough. I synced it to a clean account I made that morning. Not my main email. Not on the house Wi-Fi. Burner hotspot, private cloud. Redundant backups. I wasn't just covering bases. I was building a bunker. Every sound, every motion, every flicker of movement would be recorded, timestamped, encrypted. It felt almost too easy, like flipping a switch. And then I waited. Not like a man expecting an explosion. No, like a man sitting at the edge of a minefield, watching to see if the earth twitches. I didn't tell her. Didn't change a thing. Still kissed her on the cheek when she got home. Still asked how her day went. Still played with our son on the living room rug while she scrolled on her phone, pretending not to watch me. She had no idea. But I wasn't watching her anymore. Now the house was watching for me. It was a Monday night. Ordinary in every visible way. Our son was asleep. The dishwasher was humming. Vanessa had gone to grab drinks with coworkers, a line she tossed out while adjusting her earrings, the ones I hadn't seen in months. I wasn't planning to check the footage. I told myself I'd give it at least a week, maybe 2. Let it run, gather context. But something kept gnawing at me. Not fear. Curiosity sharpened into something colder. I pulled up the cloud panel on my laptop. Flicked through the thumbnails. Most of them were mundane, me putting the baby down, her changing clothes, vacuuming. Then, a flag. Motion detected. Saturday, 22:16. I clicked. The room lit up in grainy grayscale. The crib. The bed. The doorway. Vanessa stepped in first, hair down, coat draped over her arm. She looked light. Too light. like someone coming home from vacation, not drinks. Then he followed. Tall, shaved head, gym clothes. He laughed. She laughed louder. The kind of laugh you save for someone you're trying to impress, not someone you already promised everything to. My cursor hovered over the pause button, but I didn't press it. He sat on our bed like he belonged there. Like the memory foam already knew his weight. Vanessa leaned in, whispered something into his ear. His hand slid to her back. She didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled slow, real. That rare kind of smile I used to think only I could pull out of her. Then she reached for her ring. Slid it off with the casual elegance of someone removing an earring. No hesitation. No guilt. Just a flick of her thumb and a soft clink as it hit the floor next to the crib. And then she kissed him. Not a peck. Not an accident. The kind of kiss you don't fake. I stopped the video. Not because I couldn't watch, but because I didn't need to. One frame was enough. The timeline burned into my brain. Saturday, 10:16 p.m. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. There was no dramatic gasp, no shouting. Just this quiet, collapsing sensation in my chest. Like a steel beam snapping inside the foundation of a building no one thought could fall. I sat there, frozen, staring at her face in the paused frame. She looked young, carefree, like someone else entirely. And that's when I felt it. Not heartbreak. Not betrayal. Clarity. There would be no confrontation. No teary speeches. No late-night arguments on the front porch. She wouldn't even know I knew. Not yet. Because if Vanessa was the kind of woman who could so cleanly take off her ring in our bedroom and smile while doing it, then I was going to let her walk straight into her own fire. And I was going to make sure the whole house kept the receipts. By the third night, I stopped pretending this was about a one-time mistake. I sat in my home office, lights off, the glow from my monitor washing over my face like moonlight from a cracked window. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. What I felt was far more dangerous, methodical calm. The kind of calm that turns a man into a machine. I cued the next set of recordings. Saturday was sportswear guy. Sunday, different shoes. Different watch. Different man. Same door. Same bed. This one wore a button-up shirt, unbuttoned halfway like he'd ripped it off in the car. Vanessa welcomed him in like she was hosting a dinner party. Offered him water, in my mug. The chipped one. I watched her laugh at a joke I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. The punchline was written all over her body language. Practiced. Inviting. Familiar. I replayed that moment 3 times. Not to analyze him. I didn't care about him. I was watching her. And what terrified me wasn't the betrayal. It was the rhythm. The choreography. Like she'd rehearsed this. 2 nights later, again. Different guy. This one younger. She kissed him in the hallway before the camera even caught them. They didn't even pretend to talk. Just stumbled into the room and collapsed on the bed like this was a routine. And that's when I noticed it. Each time, she said the same thing. Word for word. Same delivery, like reading off a script. He's always at the office late. You don't have to whisper. He's always at the office late. I whispered it out loud. Let it echo. Let it marinate. That wasn't improvisation. That was cover fire. 3 men. 3 visits. 1 week. I opened up a secure directory on an external SSD I kept for freelance work. Repartitioned it. Created folders by date. Imported timestamps. Trimmed the footage down to essential segments. No fluff. No voyeurism. Just facts. Each clip named by date and hour. Each folder labeled. Each video encrypted and mirrored across 3 off-site cloud accounts. No obvious names, no easy trace. One under a throwaway domain I bought back in college. One on a server hosted out of Iceland. One on a drive hidden in a drawer she hadn't opened in years. I wrote scripts to auto-tag faces. Built a timeline with names, voice samples, facial snapshots. Cross-referenced everything with social media. Found one guy's gym. Another's LinkedIn. The youngest one? A mutual friend of someone from her book club. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was architecture. I built a dossier that could break her life in half with 2 clicks. But I didn't touch it. Not yet. Because the truth is, information is only power if you know when to use it. And Vanessa was still playing checkers. She had no idea she was on a chessboard. She started humming in the mornings again. That fake, chirpy kind of humming that sounds like it's trying too hard to say everything's fine when the walls are already on fire. Vanessa moved through the house like a woman in control, back straight, eyes sharp, criticism loaded into every casual sentence. One morning, she wrinkled her nose at the omelet I made and said, "You still overcook eggs, huh?" Then smiled like she was flirting with the edge of cruelty. I didn't flinch. I just passed her the salt. She liked to talk more now. Like guilt made her louder. Or maybe it wasn't guilt at all. Maybe it was performance. She'd tell me about some rough day with a student and sprinkle in vague frustrations about how some people just don't listen. The irony was so dense, I could have cut it with the same dull butter knife she complained about last week. But here's the part she didn't see. I was done reacting. She was poking at me like a bored cat pokes a dying bird, trying to see if I'd twitch. But all I gave her was quiet, calculated politeness. Not cold, not yet. Just neutral. And that's what rattled her. One evening, she came home late again, hair slightly damp, perfume different than the usual. She dropped her purse too hard on the entryway bench. I stayed seated at the dining table, slowly scrolling through photos on my phone, old pictures of us, back when smiles weren't masks. She poured herself wine, took a sip, leaned against the counter, and studied me. "You ever think you've become boring?" she asked, swirling the glass like we were on some talk show. I looked up. "No," I said, "but I can see how you'd think that." She chuckled, mean and light. "Maybe you need someone more fun. I mean, honestly, Jason, you're starting to feel like wallpaper." I tilted my head, took a beat. "Maybe I do need someone else," I said, then added with a smile that I didn't feel but delivered perfectly. "Someone who knows the value of quiet wallpaper. Especially the kind that watches everything." Her glass froze mid-sip. Just for a second. Barely a flicker in her expression. But I saw it. Something in her tilted. She didn't know what exactly was wrong yet. Couldn't name it. But for the first time in weeks, I watched a crack form in her confidence. A little whisper of "did I miss something?" behind her eyes. But she shook it off, rolled them, muttered something about weird moods, and disappeared upstairs. I waited a full minute before following. Just enough time for her to believe I wasn't thinking about what she'd said. She still believed she was in control. Still believed the world was shaped by her tone and timing. But I had already drafted my final script. The last act was loading, and her starring role was about to begin. The law office didn't look like much. Strip mall exterior, bad lighting, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. But inside, the silence had teeth. The receptionist smiled too much. I didn't return it. When the lawyer, Catherine Beckett, called me in, I handed her a plain black USB drive. No label, no markings. She raised an eyebrow. "Is this everything?" "Time-stamped, categorized, with backups," I said. "This one's just the highlights." She plugged it in without ceremony, clicked through folders with the clinical detachment of someone who's seen it all. Then she hit play. I watched her face, not the footage. Her eyes narrowed halfway through the second clip. The one where Vanessa laughs, tosses her ring toward the crib, and says, "You don't have to whisper. He works late. He never checks anything." Beckett paused the video. "She works in education?" she asked, turning toward me with the faintest shift in posture. "School counselor," I said. "Middle school. District D4. She exhaled sharply, like someone who's just realized they're not dealing with a typical cheating case. Well, she didn't just sabotage a marriage. She obliterated her own credibility. This footage, if even a fraction of it gets seen by the wrong people. "The right people," I corrected. She tilted her head, studied me. "Most people in my situation would be crying, ranting, begging for advice." I sat still, hands folded, like I was there to renew a license. "You're not here for closure," she said slowly. "Nope. Then what do you want?" "Custody. Property protection. And I want her career off the table before she even sees it coming." Beckett stared for a moment longer, then nodded like we'd just made a handshake deal without needing words. She opened a folder, started scribbling notes. "She's unaware you filed?" "Completely." "Good. We'll keep it that way. We'll push the petition through quietly. No drama, no warning shots. Once it's served, it'll be a brick through her stained glass reality." I handed her a printed spreadsheet. Dates, times, names, all cross-referenced with location metadata. She skimmed it, mouth tightening. Most people bring screenshots. Maybe some crying texts. You brought a digital warhead. I work in systems, I said. I know how to document failure. She almost smiled. By the time I walked out, I'd signed everything. Financial disclosures, custody claim drafts, non-disclosure clauses, even a motion to freeze the joint account before she could drain it on a lawyer of her own. Vanessa was at home that night, humming again. But now, there was a storm front forming behind the wallpaper, and she didn't even hear the thunder yet. The first domino dropped at exactly 9:12 a.m. on a Thursday. Court documents were filed that morning, strategically timed. Beckett's team had everything ready. The footage, the timeline, the metadata, all perfectly packaged with the surgical precision of someone used to building cases like traps. No rage. No spectacle. Just evidence with a pulse. Simultaneously, an anonymous report was submitted to the district superintendent's office. No names. No accusations. Just dates, times, and several heavily redacted clips blurry enough to avoid lawsuits, clear enough to make denial a losing strategy. The report included one key detail that would scorch the nerves of every administrator reading it. Individual seen entering the residence appears to be a parent of a current student. They couldn't ignore that. Not in this political climate. Not with the board breathing down their necks every week about liability, image, and community trust. And so the cracks began. 7 days later, Vanessa walked through our front door in the middle of the afternoon. Her makeup was uneven. Her blazer looked like it had been thrown on in a panic. She dropped her bag in the hallway like it had betrayed her. Her breathing was shallow, erratic, as if she'd run home instead of driven. I was at the kitchen table with our son, helping him glue construction paper to a cereal box for some school project about feelings. The irony was so rich, I could taste it. She stood there, eyes glossy, hands shaking slightly. They suspended me, she said, like she didn't believe it herself. Pending some investigation. Some complaint came in anonymous, but they said it might involve a parent. Jason, I don't even, she stopped, swallowed, tried to recalibrate her tone. I don't understand why this is happening. I looked at her, tilted my head slightly, like I was studying a stranger who wore my wife's face but didn't quite have the same eyes. Then I said it. Quiet. Surgical. Did you maybe leave something? In the bedroom? The sentence just hovered there between us like smoke from a gun she didn't know she'd fired. Her lips parted like she was going to speak, but nothing came out. I watched her scan my face for a crack. A clue. A mistake. I didn't blink. And that's when the real panic set in. Because for the first time in our entire relationship, Vanessa realized she wasn't holding the steering wheel anymore. She didn't even know where the brakes were. She woke up alone. The side of the bed where I usually slept was cold, undisturbed, the pillows still shaped from the night before. No creaking floors. No kettle boiling. No footsteps upstairs. Just silence. Thick, deliberate silence. Vanessa slipped into her robe and walked down the hallway like she was trying not to wake a sleeping house. In the kitchen, the sunlight poured in through the blinds, hitting one object on the table like a spotlight. A black folder. Nothing fancy. No brand. Just a cheap, matte black cover with blocky handwriting scrawled across the front in silver marker. Thought you might want to see what I saw. She froze, then approached. She opened it like she expected it to hiss. Inside first page, a series of high-quality printed screenshots, each marked with a date and time in the corner. In one, she's standing in our bedroom doorway with gym shirt guy. In another, she's laughing as she throws her ring onto the rug. Every shot perfectly framed by the same neutral lens. Unflinching. Next were printed exports from the baby monitor's cloud panel, login logs, device ID, the internal timeline dashboard. Evidence that this wasn't a moment of chance. It was an operation. Then came the transcripts. Dialogue transcribed, voice tagged. Mail 1. Mail 2. Subject. Her own words, in print. He's always at the office. You don't have to whisper. Let me just take this off. She read them like they were from someone else. Her hands began to tremble. Then, at the bottom of the stack, stapled, highlighted, official. Copy of formal complaint filed with the Department of Education. Title, Inappropriate conduct by school counselor involving parent of enrolled minor. Filed anonymously. Dated 3 days earlier. Attached with anonymized media stills and a notarized declaration. That's when she screamed. Not a theatrical wail. Not a cry for sympathy. It was short, sharp, animal. She stumbled back, grabbing her phone like it was a life vest. Dialed my number. Straight to voicemail. Again. Her fingers shaking harder each time. She tried texting. Jason, please call me. What is this? Why are you doing this? Send. No read receipt. Then, where are you? Send. No response. The house stayed quiet. The folder remained open on the table like a grave she had just dug up with her own hands. Upstairs, our son slept through it all. And somewhere far away, I was watching the clock. She had finally seen what I saw. And it was only the prologue. The courtroom was quiet in that sterile, unnatural way, like a hospital waiting room before bad news hits. Everything smelled like old varnish and cold coffee. Vanessa walked in fast, chin high, clutching a leather folder like it could shield her from the outcome she already felt coming. I didn't look at her. Not when she glanced over. Not when she sat just 30 feet away, fidgeting like her skin itched. I was calm, not smug. Not victorious. Still, her attorney tried the preemptive strike, classic move, claimed I'd violated her privacy, that the recordings were unethical, that I had planted surveillance equipment in a shared residence with malicious intent. He even tried to throw in emotional abuse. The judge, a woman in her 60s with zero tolerance for drama, let him finish, then gestured toward my lawyer, who stood like she'd been waiting for dessert. We'll be responding with documentation, Beckett said smoothly. Exhibits A through D are already submitted and marked. I'd like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit B, 2 brief video segments. She tapped a key. The screen behind her lit up. First clip, Vanessa standing in our bedroom. She tosses her ring off, climbs onto the bed with guest number 1. No nudity, no noise. Just the image of my wife laughing and pressing her face against another man's. Second clip, a different night. A new man. She turns to him, smiling wide, and says it. He doesn't even suspect a thing. It's great having a house where no one ever checks. The courtroom didn't gasp. It froze. A silence so loud you could hear the back of someone's pen click in the gallery. The judge didn't ask for more. She turned to Vanessa. Ma'am, she said quietly, almost gently. You didn't just break your marriage. You violated the standards of your profession. These were parents. This was your place of work bleeding into your personal life in a way that endangers children. And you thought no one would notice? Vanessa tried to speak. Just a word. It didn't come. Her lips parted, then curled inward. Her eyes glassed over. Her shoulders slumped. Not in defeat, but like she'd aged 15 years in 30 seconds. Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm. Even he couldn't meet her gaze now. The judge turned back to Beckett. Mr. Halpern will retain full physical custody of the minor child. The defendant is granted supervised visitation twice monthly, pending psychological evaluation and review by the Family Services Department. Gavel. Down. That was it. Vanessa didn't cry until she stood up. But it wasn't sobbing. It was quiet, leaking, ungraceful. Her entire body was trying to figure out whether to collapse or run. I walked past her on the way out. She whispered, "Why are you doing this?" I didn't stop, didn't even turn. Because the truth was, I hadn't done anything. She had. I just turned on the lights. It hit the news cycle before lunch. Not the front page, not yet. But it was enough. Local station. Soft-spoken anchor. White text over blurred footage and cautious phrasing. A familiar living room. A pixelated face. The headline crawled across the bottom of the screen like a slow burn. Local school counselor under investigation after explicit home footage revealed affair with student's parent. No names, of course. No outright accusations. But people aren't stupid. Parents talk. Staff whisper. Teachers forward links to each other with subject lines like, "OMG, is this her?" I didn't watch it live. Someone texted me a screen grab. I muted the thread. She must have seen it within minutes. Probably thought it wouldn't stick. Thought her careful dance of denials and half-truths could still carry her through. But then came the letter. Plain white envelope. District logo. No return address. She opened it at the kitchen counter, hands trembling, lip bitten. I watched her from the hallway, not hiding, not intruding, just observing. Like a scientist watching the final stage of an experiment unfold. She read the first line 3 times. Then again. Then again. Her knees buckled and she slid down the cabinet, letters still clutched in one hand. Your contract with the district is hereby terminated effective immediately. All benefits ceased. Do not return to campus. I didn't say a word. Didn't offer comfort. Didn't gloat. Just stood there, watching the wreckage settle in. That night, I heard her phone buzz over and then stop. I imagined the conversations. Sorry, this is a tough position for us. We just need some space. We're praying for you. Which is code for, don't contact us again. Even her sister, the one who used to defend her against everything and everyone, left her message on read. The next morning, her phone stayed silent. The house was quieter than it had ever been. She sat at the table in the same robe she'd worn for 3 days straight, staring at nothing. No coffee. No makeup. Her laptop closed like a tombstone. And me? I got dressed. Packed our son's lunch. Tied his shoes. Kissed his head. I didn't smirk. I didn't sigh. I didn't slam the door on my way out. I just left. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was gravity. And Vanessa was finally falling on her own. 2 weeks passed in absolute silence. She didn't call. Didn't show up. Didn't send friends or family to do the groveling for her. Just vanished behind the fog of her own collapse. I half expected some dramatic gesture. Flowers, letters, some handwritten manifesto blaming her childhood or stress or feeling unseen. But nothing came. Until it did. The message came through at 2:14 a.m. That desperate hour where loneliness feels like gravity and shame turns liquid. It was short. No emojis. No punctuation games. Just raw and bleeding. I was wrong. I destroyed everything. I just want you to talk to me. Please. No subject line could have captured the weight of those words more perfectly. Not I'm sorry. Not I miss you. Just the most hollow request in the world. Talk to me. I stared at it for a minute. Maybe less. Maybe more. Time blurs when a ghost begs for resurrection. I didn't feel rage. Or pity. Just detachment. Like someone rewatching a movie where they already know how it ends. So I typed back. Slow. Intentionally surgical. I talked. For months. You just weren't listening. And then, without a second thought, I tapped block. Her name vanished. The thread turned gray. The silence reasserted itself. She'd been begging for noise. For feedback. For friction. Anything to remind her that I still existed in the emotional gravity of her life. But the cruelest revenge isn't the explosion. It's the echo that never comes. Because now, every time she picks up her phone, there's only a void. And she gets to sit in the wreckage, forever replaying her own voice in her head. No more edits. No more spotlight. Just the mirror. 3 months later, the air smelled like pine and cut grass instead of old coffee and stale tension. My son was on the lawn, building a fortress out of sticks and imagination. I sat on the back porch of the new place. Nothing extravagant, but ours. No ghosts in the walls. My laptop rested beside me, screen split between draft posts for the blog I'd quietly launched, Fathers Rewritten. A space for men who'd lost everything and found more than they expected on the other side. A shadow crossed the porch. It was Leah from next door, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one without a word. Just that small, knowing smile neighbors share when they don't need to ask. We talked for a while, about weather, mulch, the raccoon that keeps tipping her trash can. Normal things. Then my phone buzzed. I picked it up lazily. A headline in the notifications. Former school counselor launches GoFundMe after losing job and custody in messy divorce scandal. Sources say her ex-husband never raised his voice. I stared at the screen for a second, then tapped it off. The sun hit my son's hair just right as he turned to me, grinning, cheeks flushed from the wind. I stood up and stretched, cracking my back like I was letting go of the final piece of something old. Come on, kid, I said. New life's not going to wait for us. And we walked out into it. No soundtrack, no applause. Just the sound of our footsteps, steady and free.
Welcome back to Shattered Trust Chronicles. If you're drawn to powerful stories about betrayal, tough decisions, and well-earned justice, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and let us know where you're tuning in from. Let's dive into today's gripping tale. The holiday lights flickered softly as I raised my glass to begin the toast, but before I could speak, my youngest son, Jason, leaned back in his chair and smirked. His voice, dripping with sarcasm, cut through the festive air. "Here's to Dad," he said, clinking his glass loudly against his brother's. "The man who taught us that hard work can buy, well, almost everything." The room fell silent. The tension was suffocating. Like the entire house had stopped breathing. My eldest, Ben, turned his head slowly, his expression a dangerous mix of confusion and anger. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" he asked, his voice low but sharp enough to make everyone flinch. Jason shrugged, leaning forward as he swirled the wine in his glass like he'd been practicing for this moment. "I mean, maybe money can't buy respect. Or truth. Isn't that what Christmas is all about, Dad? Family honesty." The edge in his voice wasn't just disrespectful. It was calculated, almost rehearsed. Before I could process what was happening, Ben shot out of his chair, his plate crashing to the floor. "You little piece of..." His fist connected with Jason's jaw before I could stop him. The sound of flesh meeting bone echoed through the room, and suddenly the table was chaos. Jason fell backward, sending his chair skidding across the floor, but he didn't stay down. He lunged forward, tackling Ben into the centerpiece, sending candles and ornaments scattering. "Stop it. Both of you, stop," Lisa screamed, her voice piercing but powerless against the storm. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. This was supposed to be our moment. The night I'd worked so hard to create. Weeks of planning, of convincing myself that maybe this year would be the one where things felt normal again. And now, it was all unraveling in front of me. Amid the chaos, my eyes darted to the far end of the table, where Mike sat. While everyone else was either screaming or scrambling to pull the boys apart, he didn't move. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, watching the scene with an expression I couldn't place. It wasn't shock. It wasn't concern. It was satisfaction. The faintest smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, and that's when it hit me. He knew. Whatever was happening here. Whatever Jason's cryptic remarks meant, Mike knew. Finally, I snapped out of my stupor, rushing around the table to pull Ben off Jason. My hands were shaking as I grabbed his arm and dragged him back. "Both of you," I bellowed, my voice louder than it had been in years. Ben's chest heaved as he glared at Jason, his lip bleeding, his fists clenched. Jason, for his part, wiped his own bloody mouth and smirked again. Typical, he muttered under his breath, his words barely audible but heavy with disdain. Lisa turned to me, her face pale and twisted with anger. "Do something," she snapped. "You're their father. Fix this." But I didn't respond. I couldn't. My attention was still on Mike, who was now standing, his hands in his pockets as he surveyed the wreckage. His calmness was almost eerie, as if he were above it all, untouched by the chaos he was standing in. And that smile. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. The fight at the Christmas table left the house in ruins. Emotionally, if not physically. Jason had stormed off to his room, slamming the door so hard that the frame shook. Ben, seething with rage, had retreated to the garage to cool off, but I could still hear him pacing, his heavy footsteps echoing through the house. Lisa, meanwhile, flitted around the living room, pretending to clean up the mess while muttering under her breath. Mike was the only one who seemed completely unaffected. He lounged in the corner of the couch, scrolling through his phone, his expression calm and detached, like none of this concerned him. I leaned against the counter in the kitchen, staring blankly at the sink. My pulse was still racing, my thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and unease. Jason's words wouldn't stop echoing in my mind. Maybe money can't buy respect or truth. What the hell did he mean by that? I tried to convince myself it was just teenage rebellion. A poorly timed attempt to embarrass me in front of the family. But there was something in the way he said it. Something too deliberate, too pointed, that made it impossible to ignore. And then there was Mike. His reaction, or lack thereof, was gnawing at me. During the fight, he hadn't lifted a finger to help. No effort to stop the chaos, no concern for Jason or Ben. Just that damned smirk, Lisa broke the silence, her voice sharp. Well, are you just going to stand there? Are you going to talk to them, or are you going to let them tear each other apart? Her tone made my jaw tighten, but I didn't respond. Instead, I watched her. She wasn't looking at me directly. She hadn't since the fight started. Her movements were jerky, like she was trying too hard to look busy. "Why don't you sit down?" I said finally, keeping my voice steady. "You're acting like you're the one who got punched." She froze for a second, her back to me, before turning around with a forced laugh. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. Someone has to clean up this mess." "God knows you won't." I didn't take the bait. Something was off, and I wasn't going to let her distract me with her usual sharp comments. "I'll talk to them," I said. "But first, I need to know something." Her eyes narrowed. "What? What's going on with Jason?" "What do you mean?" She snapped too quickly. "You know exactly what I mean," I said, stepping closer. Those comments. He wasn't just being a smartass, he was trying to say something. Lisa crossed her arms, her defensive posture unmistakable. "He's a teenager, Ben. He's moody, he's hormonal, and he's mad that you're always at work. What do you expect?" Her answer was too rehearsed, too pat. It only made my suspicion grow. "Might I asked, my tone sharper now. Why didn't he step in? Why was he just sitting there, watching like it was some kind of show?" Lisa's lips pressed into a thin line. "Mike isn't their father. It's not his responsibility to referee your sons." Her words stung, but I ignored the jab. "It's not just that," I said. He was smiling, Lisa. While our sons were beating the hell out of each other, he was smiling. Lisa's face flushed, and for a moment, I thought she was going to snap. But instead, she laughed a cold, hollow sound. "You're being ridiculous," she said, brushing past me toward the stairs. "Maybe if you actually spent time with your family instead of working yourself into paranoia, you'd understand what's going on." I stared after her, my stomach twisting. Paranoia, that was what she always called it whenever I pushed too hard, whenever I asked questions she didn't want to answer. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but I knew I wasn't imagining things. There was something happening here, something she didn't want me to see, and I was going to find out what it was. The morning after the disastrous Christmas dinner, the house was eerily quiet. The shattered ornament pieces and wine-stained tablecloth still hadn't been cleaned up, but no one seemed eager to address it. Lisa was holed up in the bedroom, avoiding eye contact and offering clipped answers to my questions. Jason stayed in his room, blasting music loud enough to rattle the windows, while Ben had left early, muttering something about needing to clear his head. Mike, however, was still here. He moved around the house with the ease of someone who wasn't just a guest. He made himself coffee in the kitchen, sprawled across the couch with the remote, and acted as though he had no intention of leaving anytime soon. I couldn't ignore the tension any longer. Every interaction with Lisa felt like a carefully choreographed performance, her responses too polished, her smiles too tight. She hadn't even brought up the fight or Jason's cryptic comments from the night before, which struck me as strange. Lisa wasn't one to let things slide. By midday, I decided I needed some fresh air. I grabbed my coat and headed for the garage, only to find Mike already there, leaning against my workbench with a beer in hand. "Taking a breath or two," he said, smiling like we were old friends. I forced a polite nod and moved to grab the shovel I'd left by the door, but Mike wasn't done. "You know," he said, his tone casual, "kids these days, they've got a lot to say, but not always the guts to say it outright. Jason, for a sharp kid, but a little too bold for his own good." I froze. There was something in his voice, a deliberate weight to his words. I turned to face him, trying to keep my expression neutral. "What are you getting at?" I asked. Mike shrugged, taking another swig of his beer. "Nothing, really. Just an observation. You've got a lot on your plate, Ben, a man like you, hardworking, successful. Probably doesn't have time to notice all the little things happening under his own roof." The way he said it made my stomach churn. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't idle conversation. He was baiting me. "Is there something you want to say, Mike?" I asked, my voice steady but sharp. His smile widened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he clapped me on the shoulder and walked past me. leaving me alone in the garage with 1,000 questions and no answers. Later that afternoon, as Lisa busied herself in the kitchen, I decided to snoop. I wasn't proud of it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I started in the living room, sifting through drawers and cabinets, but found nothing unusual. Next, I checked Lisa's office desk upstairs. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Bills, receipts, and the usual clutter. But then I noticed a folder tucked at the back of the bottom drawer. Inside were receipts for hotel stays, expensive dinners, and luxury spa visits. All dated over the past 6 months. None of them were familiar to me, and none of them matched anything we'd done as a family. My heart pounded as I flipped through them. One receipt in particular caught my eye. It was from a high-end jewelry store for a diamond bracelet worth several $1,000s. I stared at it, my mind racing. I hadn't bought her this. Before I could think further, Lisa called up the stairs. "Ben, what are you doing up there?" I shoved the folder back into the drawer and closed it, my hands shaking. "Just looking for some papers," I called back, forcing my voice to sound casual. As I walked downstairs, I caught sight of Mike again, lounging in the armchair with that same infuriating smirk. He glanced at me, his eyes lingering just long enough to make my skin crawl. I didn't know exactly what was going on yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't imagining things. And whatever this was, it was deeper than I could have ever expected. The next few days were a dance of tension and avoidance. Lisa remained cold and distant, her movements sharp and her words clipped. Jason refused to look me in the eye, his headphones glued to his head as he avoided any interaction. Ben, thankfully, seemed oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, though he occasionally shot Jason a glare that told me the fight wasn't forgotten. Mike, however, was a different story. His presence felt heavier with each passing day, like a shadow in every room he occupied. He was always around, always watching, but never quite participating. Every time our eyes met, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was daring me to put the pieces together. By the third day, I couldn't take the suffocating atmosphere anymore. I waited until Lisa and the boys were out of the house and cornered Mike in the living room. "All right," I said, crossing my arms as he looked up from his phone. "What's your game, Mike?" He raised an eyebrow, his smirk as infuriating as ever. "Game. I'm just here for the holidays, Ben. Relax. Quit the crap," I snapped, my voice low but firm. "You've been walking around here like you own the place, dropping cryptic little comments every chance you get. What's going on?" For the first time, his smirk faltered, replaced by something colder. He set his phone down and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Careful, Ben," he said, his tone a mix of warning and mockery. "You're starting to sound paranoid." My stomach churned. That word again. First Lisa, now Mike. "You think I don't see what's happening here?" I said, refusing to let him rattle me. "I know something's going on. I don't know what yet, but I'm going to find out." Mike's gaze didn't waver. If anything, he looked almost impressed. "Good luck with that," he said, standing up and brushing past me like the conversation was over. But I wasn't done. That night, I went back to the folder in Lisa's desk. My heart raced as I pulled it out again, this time taking my time to study each receipt carefully. Most of the purchases were in nearby towns, but a few were from places farther away. Places she had no reason to visit. One receipt, in particular, caught my attention. It was for a luxury hotel, dated 2 months ago, in a city Lisa had never mentioned visiting. The name on the receipt wasn't hers, it was Mike's. My blood ran cold. I dug deeper, pulling out bank statements and credit card bills. The transactions were scattered and inconsistent, but there was a clear pattern. Money was being spent, large amounts, and I had no idea what for: jewelry, trips, even withdrawals from savings accounts I hadn't touched in years. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture they painted was too horrific to accept outright. I needed proof. Real proof. I remembered seeing an ad for an at-home DNA testing kit a few weeks back, and a terrible idea began to form in my mind. Jason's biting words from the dinner table came rushing back, and with them, the memories of all the times I had noticed something different about him. His features, his mannerisms, the way he never quite fit in with me or Ben. I didn't want to believe it, but the doubt had planted itself firmly in my mind. The next morning, I ordered the kit. The instructions said it would take weeks for results, but that didn't matter. I had waited this long for answers. I could wait a little longer. In the meantime, I kept up appearances, pretending everything was fine while Lisa and Mike continued their charade. Every forced smile from Lisa, every casual comment from Mike only made my resolve stronger. I was going to find the truth, and when I did, there would be no going back. The days leading up to New Year's felt like walking through a minefield. Every conversation, every glance, was loaded with unspoken tension. Lisa's cheerful facade was starting to crack, her sharp tones slipping through more frequently. Mike's presence grew bolder, as if he'd decided to abandon all pretense. He was constantly in my space, commenting on my work ethic, the state of the house, even jokingly questioning my parenting decisions. "Do you ever take a day off, Ben?" he said one morning, leaning against the doorway of my home office. "I mean, I get it. You've got to pay the bills, but you should really loosen up. Life's too short to stress so much." I didn't respond. I was done with his casual digs disguised as advice. Instead, I stared at my computer screen, the spreadsheet in front of me blurring as I replayed his words in my head. "Life's too short." Was that a taunt, a reminder? The DNA test kit had been mailed off, and now all I could do was wait. But I wasn't idle. I started taking photos of the receipts I found in Lisa's desk, compiling a quiet record of her unexplained expenses. Late at night, when the house was silent, I combed through bank statements and credit card bills, connecting dots that painted an increasingly damning picture. Then I found the email. It was buried in her sent folder, dated 3 weeks ago, with the subject line, "Details confirmed." The email itself was short and vague, but it referenced a reservation at an expensive resort in Tahoe, a reservation for two. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. The email had been sent to Mike. The resort wasn't far from here, about an hour's drive. As I sat there, gripping the edge of the desk, an idea began to form. The next morning, I told Lisa I had a meeting with a client and left the house early. She didn't ask questions, barely even looked up from her coffee. I drove to the resort, my pulse pounding the entire way. When I arrived, I parked in the farthest corner of the lot and walked into the lobby, doing my best to look like I belonged. The receptionist glanced up and smiled. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "So I need to confirm a reservation," I said, forcing a casual tone. "It's for my wife, Lisa, and I just wanted to make sure everything's in order." "Bah." The receptionist tapped on her keyboard, her smile never faltering. "Sure thing." "What's Lisa Bennett?" I said, holding my breath. Her fingers paused mid-typing, and her eyes flicked up to meet mine. "Actually, I have a reservation under Lisa Bennett for earlier this month. Checked out December 15th. Is that the one?" I felt the air leave my lungs. December 15th. She'd told me she was visiting her sister that weekend. "Why, yeah, that's the one," I stammered, barely managing to keep my composure. "And that was a 2-person reservation, right?" "Wes, sir," she said, nodding. "Lisa Bennett and Michael Peterson. Mike." I thanked her and left as quickly as I could, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. The pieces weren't just falling into place. They were crashing down like an avalanche. Lisa had lied. About where she was, about who she was with, and Mike. He wasn't just a guest overstaying his welcome. He was something far worse. As I drove back home, my mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? How much had they stolen from me, not just in money but in trust, in dignity? When I walked through the door, Lisa greeted me with a smile that now felt like a slap in the face. "How was your meeting?" she asked, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "Fine," I said, my tone flat. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more proof, more leverage. But one thing was certain. This wasn't going to end with a quiet conversation. The next few days were a delicate balancing act. Every moment I spent at home felt like I was navigating a house of cards, one wrong move away from everything collapsing. Lisa seemed oblivious to my discovery, maintaining her rehearsed cheerfulness while sidestepping any meaningful conversations. Mike, on the other hand, had grown bolder, making sarcastic quips that felt less like jokes and more like veiled taunts. At the same time, I couldn't let my growing suspicions show. Not to Lisa, not to Mike, not even to Ben. The tension was palpable, but I couldn't risk confrontation without ironclad proof. On the 3rd day after the Tahoe discovery, Lisa cornered me in the kitchen as I was fixing coffee. Her smile was tight, her posture tense. Ben, she began, her voice overly sweet. We need to talk. I stiffened, keeping my expression neutral. About what? She leaned against the counter, her arms crossed. About us. You've been acting strange lately. Distant, like, you don't trust me. It was the perfect opening for a fight. The kind of emotional trap she'd been laying for years. But I wasn't biting. I've just been tired, I said flatly, sipping my coffee. Work's been draining. Her eyes narrowed, searching my face for cracks. Is that all? Because it feels like there's more to it. I met her gaze, holding it for a moment longer than usual. If there's something you want to say, Lisa, just say it. And she hesitated, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Then, just as quickly, she regained her composure. Fine, she said, brushing past me. If you want to act like this, that's on you. But don't expect me to keep pretending everything's fine. As she walked away, I noticed Mike watching from the living room, his eyes lingering on me with that same smug expression. He knew something. Or, worse, he knew I knew something. That evening, I took another deep dive into our financials, using my work laptop to ensure there'd be no traces left behind. What I found left me shaking with barely contained fury. Over the past year, nearly $50,000 had been drained from our joint savings account. The withdrawals were small enough not to draw immediate attention, but frequent enough to add up. There were also wire transfers to an account I didn't recognize, all labeled under vague descriptions like family expenses. Family, every detail pointed to Lisa, and by extension Mike. The resort in Tahoe wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a pattern. They'd been living a life I had no part in, funded by my hard-earned money. And yet, there was still one piece missing, Jason. I hadn't forgotten about the DNA test. It was the keystone. The one thing that would either confirm my darkest fears or give me a reason to stop spiraling. The results were due any day now, and I found myself checking my email obsessively, waiting for the notification. 2 mornings later it came. I sat in my car in the driveway, the unopened email glaring back at me from my phone screen. My hand shook as I opened it, scanning the clinical language until I found the result. And probability of paternity is due %. I read it again and again. My world tilted, the edges of my vision blurring as the words burned themselves into my mind. Jason wasn't mine. The realization hit me like a freight train. I thought I'd been prepared for this, but nothing could have readied me for the finality of seeing it in black and white. Every memory of Jason, his birth, his first steps, the times I'd stayed up late helping him with homework, all of it felt like a cruel joke. I gripped the steering wheel, and my knuckles, white as a wave of emotions, crashed over me. Rage, betrayal, grief. But beneath it all, there was a cold, calculating clarity. This wasn't just about Jason anymore. It wasn't just about my money or the lies Lisa had told. It was about taking back control. I wasn't going to let them destroy everything I'd built. Not without a fight. That night, I started planning. Every move I made was deliberate. Gathering more evidence, documenting every receipt, every transaction, every email. I created a folder on my laptop labeled simply, The Truth. Lisa noticed my sudden focus, but when she asked about it, I deflected. Work's picking up, I said with a tired smile. Of year reports. She didn't press further, but I could tell she was watching me closely now, as if sensing the shift in power. Mike, too, seemed more cautious, his smirks less frequent, his comments less biting. The tension in the house was a living, breathing thing, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the dam broke. But I wasn't rushing. When the truth came out, it wouldn't be in whispers or half measures. It would be undeniable, unforgettable, and they wouldn't see it coming. The house was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. Every sound, creak in the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, felt amplified, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I sat at the dining table, the folder of evidence in front of me, flipping through the pages for the 100th time. Receipts, bank transfers, emails. It was all here. Every lie, every betrayal, meticulously recorded. My mind replayed the moment I read the DNA results, the final nail in the coffin. Jason wasn't mine. He was Mike's. I'd spent the last few nights barely sleeping, my thoughts a constant storm of anger and resolve. I wanted answers. I wanted justice. But most of all, I wanted them to feel the same devastation they'd inflicted on me. Lisa had grown more nervous in the days following my discovery. Her attempts to engage me in small talk felt forced, and she'd started spending more time with Mike, whispering in the kitchen or exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. It was clear they knew something was wrong, but they didn't know how much I knew, and I was going to keep it that way. The turning point came on a cold Friday evening. Lisa announced that she wanted to host a small follow-up dinner to smooth things over after the disaster at Christmas. Just immediate family, she said, her tone casual. It'll be good for the boys to see us all getting along. I knew what she was doing. This wasn't about family harmony. It was about control. Lisa was trying to regain the upper hand, to reassert the narrative that she and Mike weren't hiding anything. I agreed, of course. I think that's a great idea, I said, my voice even. She blinked, surprised by my lack of resistance, then smiled. Good. I'll start planning. As soon as she left the room, I began preparing for what would be the final act. The night of the dinner arrived quickly. I stayed in the background as Lisa and Mike prepared the food and set the table, their banter lighthearted and carefree. They were trying so hard to maintain the facade, but their movements were stiff, their laughter forced. Jason and Ben arrived at the table first, their dynamic as strained as ever. Jason avoided Ben's glare, keeping his head down as he picked at his food. When everyone was seated, Lisa raised her glass, smiling broadly. To family, she said. No matter what, we always stick together. Her words made my stomach turn. I waited until the plates were cleared, the wine flowing freely, and the room settled into a false sense of ease. Then I stood, folder in hand, and cleared my throat. I have something I'd like to say. I began, my voice calm but firm. All eyes turned to me. Lisa's smile faltered, and Mike's expression tightened ever so slightly. This family has been through a lot recently, I said, glancing at Jason and Ben, and I think it's time we clear the air. Get everything out in the open. Lisa shifted in her seat. Ben, this isn't the time. Oh, I think it is. I cut her off, my gaze locking onto hers. I opened the folder and pulled out the DNA results, holding them up for everyone to see. This, I said, my voice steady, is the proof that Jason isn't my biological son. The room erupted into chaos. Jason's head shot up, his eyes wide with shock. Ben looked stunned, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to process the words. Lisa shot out of her chair, her face pale. Ben, what the hell are you doing? I'm telling the truth, I said, my voice rising. Something you should have done years ago. Mike stayed seated, his expression unreadable, but there was no mistaking the flicker of fear in his eyes. I turned to Jason, my heart breaking as I spoke. Jason, this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault, but you deserve to know the truth. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he looked at Lisa, his voice trembling. Mum, Elisa stammered, her composure crumbling. I can explain. But I wasn't done. I slammed the folder onto the table, pulling out receipts and bank statements. This isn't just about Jason. This is about every lie, every dollar you've stolen from me. The trips, the jewelry, the money funneled into Mike's account. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Lisa's face twisted with anger. You went through my things. You invaded my privacy, your privacy. I snapped. What about my trust, my family? You and Mike have been playing me for a fool, but it ends now. Mike finally stood, his voice low but steady. All right, Ben, that's enough. You're blowing this out of proportion. I laughed bitterly. Out of proportion. You fathered my son. You stole my money. And now you have the nerve to sit there and act like I'm the problem. The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa and Mike had no defense, no clever excuses left to hide behind. Ben stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked at Lisa, his voice shaking with rage. You did this. To Dad. To Jason. To all of us. Lisa reached for him, but he recoiled, his face filled with disgust. Jason stood as well, his tears now flowing freely. I can't believe you, Mom. How could you do this? The room was falling apart, just as I had planned. And I felt no remorse. The aftermath of my revelation was a storm of emotions that swept through the house, leaving nothing untouched. Lisa fled the dining room first, her excuses and denials trailing behind her like a tattered flag. Jason followed, his sobs echoing down the hallway, while Ben stayed rooted to the spot, his fists clenched and his jaw tight. Mike was the only one who didn't move. He stood across the table, arms folded, his face carefully blank. Well, he said finally, breaking the silence. I guess you got what you wanted, Ben. The sheer audacity of his tone sent a fresh wave of rage coursing through me. I stepped around the table, closing the distance between us. You think this is over, I said, my voice low and cold. You think you can just stand there and act like none of this matters? He shrugged, a flicker of annoyance breaking through his mask of calm. It's a family issue, Ben. You've made your point. No need to drag this out. And a bitter laugh escaped me. Family issue. You think this is just a family issue? You stole my wife, my son, my money. And now you're going to stand there and pretend you're the victim. He took a step back, his composure slipping for the first time. Look, things happen, all right? People make mistakes. Maybe it's time you start thinking about your part in all this. That was it. The final insult. I didn't trust myself to respond without losing control, so I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Mike standing in the wreckage of the evening. The days that followed were a blur of tension and silence. Lisa avoided me entirely, locking herself in the bedroom or slipping out of the house for hours at a time. Jason refused to speak to either of us, retreating into his room like a wounded animal. Only Ben seemed to be holding it together, but even he kept his distance, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. I focused on my next steps. The evidence I had gathered was damning, but it wasn't enough. I needed something bigger, something that would ensure neither Lisa nor Mike could twist the narrative. My opportunity came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, while Lisa was out and Jason was at a friend's house, I caught Mike on the phone in the kitchen. I don't care what he thinks he knows, Mike was saying. Just keep everything quiet for now. We'll handle it once this all blows over. Bah. I moved silently, edging closer until I could hear every word. Look, I don't want to talk about this on the phone, he continued. We'll meet at the usual place tomorrow. Same time. He ended the call and turned, freezing when he saw me standing in the doorway. Something you want to share, Mike? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He recovered quickly, flashing that infuriating smirk. Just business, he said. You wouldn't understand. I didn't press him. I didn't need to. His slip was enough to give me exactly what I needed. The next day, I followed him. I stayed far enough back to avoid detection, my pulse pounding as he drove into the city. He parked outside a nondescript building and walked inside, glancing over his shoulder before disappearing through the door. I waited 10 minutes before following, my heart hammering as I climbed the stairs. On the second floor, I found the office, a small, private law firm specializing in financial disputes. Through the frosted glass, I could just make out Mike's silhouette, leaning across the desk toward a man who was gesturing emphatically. I couldn't hear the conversation, but it was clear they were discussing something serious. I snapped a photo with my phone, documenting the name of the firm and the address. Whatever Mike was planning, this place was part of it, and I was going to find out why. That evening, I confronted Lisa. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when I dropped the photo onto the coffee table in front of her. She looked up. Where fits this? She asked, her voice unsteady. Meek, I said, my tone cutting. At a law firm. Care to explain what he's doing there? She stared at the photo, her hands trembling slightly. I don't know, she stammered. Why would I know? Because you've been in on this from the beginning, I snapped. The money, the lies. You think I don't know about the account you've been funneling my savings into? You think I didn't figure out your little trips together? Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? I said, my voice rising. To Jason, to Ben, to me. And she didn't answer. Instead, she broke down, sobbing into her hands as the weight of her actions finally caught up with her. But I didn't let her tears sway me. This wasn't over yet. The tension in the house had reached a breaking point. Every interaction was laced with unspoken accusations, every glance a battlefield. Lisa had become uncharacteristically quiet after our confrontation. Her usual sharpness was replaced with a subdued, almost defeated demeanor. It didn't fool me. She wasn't giving up, she was waiting for her moment. Mike, on the other hand, was as brazen as ever. His smug confidence hadn't waned, though I noticed the occasional slip, a flicker of nervousness in his gaze, a hesitation in his words. He was starting to crack, but I needed more. That's when I decided to force their hand. The following morning, I called Ben into the living room. He sat across from me, his expression guarded but curious. "What's this about, Dad?" he asked. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "Ben, I need you to trust me. What I'm about to tell you is going to change a lot of things, but I need you to keep it between us for now. Can you do that?" He nodded slowly, his brows furrowing. "Okay. What's going on?" I handed him the DNA results and watched as his face shifted from confusion to disbelief to anger. "Jason's not." His voice trailed off, and he looked up at me, his eyes wide. "No," I said. "And that's not all. Lisa and Mike have been funneling money out of our accounts for years. They've been lying to all of us, Ben. And it's time we put an end to it." Ben sat back, running a hand through his hair. "Jesus, Dad, this is insane. What do you want me to do?" I hesitated, weighing my words carefully. "I need you to stay calm. Stay quiet. There's going to be a family dinner tomorrow night, and I'm going to lay everything out. All I ask is that you be there. For Jason. And for me." He nodded again, his jaw tightening. "You can count on me." The next evening, the house was eerily calm as I prepared for the final confrontation. Lisa had gone out earlier in the day, claiming she needed to clear her head, while Mike had been conspicuously absent. By the time everyone gathered at the table, the atmosphere was suffocating. Lisa and Mike sat across from me, their smiles strained and their laughter hollow. Ben and Jason sat on either side of me, their tension palpable. Dinner was a quiet affair, the clinking of silverware the only sound. Finally, as dessert was being served, I stood and cleared my throat. "There's something I need to say." I began, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Lisa froze, her fork hovering mid-air. Mike leaned back in his chair, his expression carefully neutral. "This family has been living a lie," I continued, looking around the table. "And it's time the truth came out." I pulled out the folder and placed it on the table, opening it to the DNA results. "This," I said, holding up the paper, "is proof that Jason is not my biological son." Jason's fork clattered to his plate. "What?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Jason," I said, my heart breaking as I met his gaze. "You deserve to know the truth." Lisa shot to her feet, her face pale. "Ben, stop this. You're ruining everything. I'm ruining everything." I snapped, turning on her. "You lied to me, to Jason, to all of us. You've been stealing from me, funneling money to your brother, and now you want to play the victim." Mike stood as well, his voice low and menacing. "Careful, Ben. You don't want to say something you'll regret." I laughed bitterly. "Regret? The only thing I regret is letting you into my home, into my life. But it ends here." I began laying out the evidence one piece at a time. Bank statements, receipts, photos of Mike at the law firm. The more I revealed, the more Lisa and Mike scrambled to explain themselves, their excuses growing weaker with every word. Ben stood abruptly, his voice shaking with anger. "You did this. To Jason. What the hell is wrong with you?" Lisa reached for him, but he recoiled, his face filled with disgust. Jason sat frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the table as tears streamed down his face. "Mom, why? Why would you do this?" The room descended into chaos. Lisa and Mike shouting over each other in a desperate attempt to regain control. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no escaping it. By the time the dust settled, Lisa and Mike were gone, leaving the rest of us in a stunned silence. Jason and Ben stayed with me, their loyalty unwavering despite the betrayal we'd all suffered. As I sat alone in the living room that night, the weight of everything finally hit me. The lies, the betrayal, the years I'd spent living in a facade. It was over. But so was their power over me, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The hours following the dinner confrontation were a blur of chaos and shattered emotions. Lisa and Mike had fled the house, their hurried departure filled with weak protests and empty threats. Jason was inconsolable, retreating to his room, while Ben sat beside me on the couch, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Are you okay, Dad?" Ben finally asked, breaking the heavy silence. I stared at the remnants of the folder on the coffee table, the damning evidence that had unraveled everything I thought I knew. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice hollow. Ben nodded, his fists clenched. "I want to talk to Jason," he said after a moment. "He needs to know we're here for him." I squeezed his shoulder. "You're a good brother. He'll need you more than ever." As Ben disappeared upstairs, I allowed myself a moment of solitude, letting the weight of the evening settle over me. But there was no relief, no sense of closure. The truth was out. But the damage Lisa and Mike had caused was far from repaired. The next day, I woke to find an email waiting in my inbox, an automatic alert from my bank. It was a low balance notification on an account I hadn't touched in months. My heart sank as I opened it. The account had been emptied, every cent gone. I gripped the edge of the desk, my mind racing. Lisa and Mike were on the run, but they hadn't gone quietly. This was retaliation, a desperate, last-ditch attempt to hurt me even more. I immediately called the bank, spending the next hour navigating customer service and fraud investigations. By the time I hung up, the reality was clear. The money wasn't coming back without a fight, and even then, there were no guarantees. But this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about principle, about justice. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I spent the next few days combing through every piece of evidence I had. The photo of Mike at the law firm became a centerpiece of my case. I'd confirmed through further digging that he'd been there to discuss setting up a separate account, one he'd used to stash the stolen money. Meanwhile, Lisa's transactions painted a damning picture. Luxury hotels, expensive dinners, extravagant gifts, all funded by years of lies and deceit. Every discovery added fuel to the fire, but it also brought me closer to a decision I'd been avoiding. What kind of justice did I want? It would have been easy to sink to their level, to find a way to ruin them as thoroughly as they'd tried to ruin me. But then I looked at Jason and Ben, saw the pain they were already carrying, and I knew I couldn't let this become about revenge. I needed closure, not vengeance. The opportunity for that closure came sooner than I expected. A few days later, Lisa called. Her voice was shaky, her usual confidence replaced with a veneer of desperation. "Ben, we need to talk." "I think we're past that point," I replied coldly. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "It's about Jason. He's refusing to talk to me. I don't know what to do." Her sudden concern for Jason rang hollow, but I saw an opening. "Fine," I said. "Come to the house tomorrow. Bring Mike." She hesitated. "Why Mike?" "Because I'm done with the half-truths," I said firmly. "We're settling this once and for all. And if you're not here, I'll handle it on my own. Your choice." She agreed, reluctantly, and the stage was set for the final confrontation. The next evening, Lisa and Mike arrived together, their expressions a mix of guilt and defiance. I greeted them at the door, my demeanor calm but unyielding. "Let's not waste time," I said, leading them into the living room where Ben and Jason were already seated. Lisa's gaze lingered on Jason, her eyes welling up. "Sweetheart, Don't," Jason interrupted, his voice firm but trembling. "You don't get to call me that anymore." Lisa flinched. But I stepped in before she could respond. "This isn't just about Jason," I said, locking eyes with her and then Mike. "This is about everything. The lies, the theft, the betrayal. You've taken enough from this family, and now it's time to face the consequences." I laid out the final pieces of evidence. The stolen money, the DNA results, the transactions, and the law firm records. With every word, their defenses crumbled. Lisa tried to protest, her voice rising in desperation, but Mike remained silent, his face a mask of defeat. "I trusted you," I said, my voice breaking as I turned to Lisa. "I built a life with you. And this is how you repay me, by tearing our family apart." And tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing but exhaustion. "And you," I said, turning to Mike. "You pretended to be family. You walked into my home, ate at my table, and stabbed me in the back." He finally spoke, his voice low. "What do you want from us, Ben?" I looked at Jason and Ben, their faces etched with pain but also with strength. "I want my family back," I said simply, "and you're not part of it anymore." With that, I told them to leave. No more negotiations, no more second chances. Their time in our lives was over. As the door closed behind them, I turned to my sons. "We'll get through this," I said, my voice steady. "Together." And for the first time in weeks, I believed it.